All right, in this video, I'm gonna walk you through another D&D character design, the Kobold Rogue. I really loved creating this character because it was for one of my best friends that basically commissioned me to do it for free, because that kind of drives home the point. It's not what you know, it's who you know. So he was lucky enough to get a D&D character commission from me. It was very fun to do, and I loved the description, and I just love drawing dragons in general. So I'm gonna start with that as well, by the way, because when you wanna create a character like this, especially an anthropomorphized draconic character, kobolds, I think, are the smallest draconic creatures in the D&D universe, and so they have some special traits, but all in all, it's still a dragon-like character. So the thing I feel works best to start with is sort of having your template of drawing dragons. And I'm going to get to the point with this because I have that sort of template. I draw a lot of characters, okay? And I draw a lot of dragons, but I still have sort of my go-to shapes that have a certain amount of elements that I just base it on. So for me, obviously, as you can see, my dragons are based on alligators. And even more specifically, especially if I want to do them a little bit more cutesy, I do it on baby alligators because it's just, they have so much fun shape language and designs that it really helps me just create a little bit more uniqueness in the dragons overall. But as you can see, and as what we teach at Artwod, is to deconstruct everything. And I really use that deconstruction because from there, I can use these shapes and reiterate them and come up with something new. This is obviously for our students an illustration of how I think about things. In reality, when I go to iterate and design, I don't do it that way. I'm very scribbly, as you'll see in the next iterations. But I still think about this, and this is what I want to show you guys as well, is that every time I talk about form, I don't do it just to please you, okay? Or just to say something. No, I do it to reiterate how I think and how I teach. And this is what I teach, and this is why I believe so much in the concept of understanding form and manipulating form. As you can see as well here with the eyes, like it's not just I draw or I look at lizard eyes and that's just what I copy. No, I literally deconstructed very, very far to the point where you almost start to wonder, like, why would you even do it that far, Antonio? And it's just because I like it. It makes analytical sense for me. And so it becomes easier to draw these things from imagination. And that's what I think about. And so every time you see my dragons, when I go to ideate them, all of these shapes, you will recognize those shapes in there. I'm not drawing them in their very, technical, like 3D form shape. I'm using 2D graphic shapes, but all of the times I'm thinking about these shapes. You'll see those shapes echoed throughout how I draw their dragons all the time. And it's not that it limits me, it actually makes me more creative because, again, I mentioned this a lot, limitation creates creativity. So I can now just be more creative with those specific shapes and come up with some, just more unique dragon designs of my own. Now, before you do anything else, make sure that you click the link in the description and get our free ebook. This book is absolutely fantastic. Some of you won't even understand why it's free. We didn't need to make it for free, but we wanted to make it for free for several reasons. But one of the main reasons we wanted to make it for free is, one, it's accessible, and it just gets everyone that uses the book and reads the book gets an insight into actually how we teach, our unique teaching philosophy at Artwod. It gives you an insight into primarily what you'll be learning in our Artwod Beginner Road and applying, and it will give you these aha moments into how we at Artwod make you intuitive at perspective and how we really help you better to draw from imagination in a very approachable manner. So you'll get these aha moments of why we teach this philosophy, especially our staple unique approach to form manipulation that you won't learn anywhere else, on how to really look at form, how to be able to manipulate form that then turns into actual believable things that you can draw from imagination. We've supplemented some of our YouTube videos where you can go watch how we use these methods and principles and then create cool things. You'll get a really good insight into our beginner road and how to understand better what it takes to draw from imagination. And that, I think, we've done such a good job with this book, and you can get it for free. All right. like I said, we don't need to make money from this book. I naturally believe that all the value you get from this book, you're going to want to practice that, and that will lead you to Artwod anyway. We sort of want to unveil some of the secrets we have at Artwod on how to better get people into learning to draw from imagination. That's what this book is for. That will naturally kind of give you a hunger to do more. As it should, because drawing is awesome, especially when you can do it from imagination. Click the link in the description, get this book. It's truly awesome, and it's free. Then going into the Kobold Rogue, my friend wanted to have a specific Kobold Rogue, and he gave sort of kind of descriptions of what their abilities were and what they needed to have in terms of gear. But for me, I always start with the focal thing, like what's the one thing that makes it that specific design? And it's already in the name, right? Kobold, glaringly obvious. Rogue, not so obvious to a lot of you, but like rogue is the key thing here. How do I make this character look like a rogue? So a lot of this will be in the posing, but also just overall in the stockiness of the character. So when I go to design, my first iterations sort of always look like this. And this is very similar to what I showed you here in the sketchbook, right? Very, very similar. Just what I'm doing is I'm literally thinking about these shapes, right? These head shapes, because I start with the head. For me, this is the focal point. And I'm just thinking about how these 3D graphical shapes that I was talking about, how do I now reiterate them, remanipulate them, and redesign them so that I can come up with different kinds of draconic designs. And I will do it like this, and I will elongate them till I find something that just really works for me. Of course, I'm looking at existing Kobold designs as well, from what we see from the D&D universe. But a lot of the times I really don't want to focus on that or look at that because those are existing designs. And often I really like to come up with just my own spin on things. And because this was a private commission for a friend, I had a lot of liberty in how I created that character. And so from there, this is sort of a first ideation. And actually, I already went very much in detail here to the point where I didn't actually like it. Some of these things were working, but I just didn't overall like the design. And this is very interesting because as soon as I don't like something, or when I'm starting to struggle with the line art itself, meaning that I'm starting to struggle with the detail, meaning that I'm too hyper-focused on the detail itself, what I will actually start doing is I'll go back to a very scribbly phase. So I'll go back to a very rough sketch like this, where as you can see, I've really now played with sort of that elongated version of the head, and the shapes are still there, and it's still my focal point because I want to make sure that everyone understands that this is a kobold kind of race that is anthropomorphized, but this is my focal point. But still, I'm like, I know all of the gear that he sort of wanted to have on the character. And so he needed some potions, and he definitely needed a crossbow on the back, and he needed to have some obvious cool daggers or swords/daggers. So that was the brief. And I was like, okay, I just need those shapes in here, and I'll just rough them in till I find something that is graphically pleasing. I do repeat this often, but maybe not enough in these videos, is that even though we focus a lot on, very technical understanding of form in Artwod, I'm literally just repurposing the shapes that I showed you guys earlier in a different way by just manipulating them in space and having a good understanding of their form, right? It's a very technical way to go about it. But that creates understanding, because that's what you need to have before you can go into what I would call phase number 2, or the more advanced phase, is where you actually reverse engineer things back into. So you start with something that is seemingly very graphic, right? It doesn't necessarily have any 3D form, but you can reverse engineer form back into it. And that is a superpower, because then you can start freely ideating, because you can always bring it back to something believable. And so that's what I do. Now, usually, and I did this just for the fun of it, I would then go and detail my line art, right? I would detail it more. Actually, in this case, though, admittedly, I didn't do that. For the exact reason that I mentioned earlier, is that I wasn't too happy with my first iteration of the design, and I got caught up in detail. And I was like, and I did this a lot when I was a professional concept artist as well. As soon as I got stuck on hyper focusing on detail, what I would actually do is I would take the rough sketch and then just fill it in graphically. And I would just literally take a lasso tool and start filling it in. And then I would start carving out shapes within that silhouette, as you see here with the daggers, or with the loincloth. And I would just go and actually just start filling in, just with a lasso tool, how I would like the design to be. Now, I think this is an incredible, really cool way of working, especially if you're a bit more advanced, because it allows you to play a little bit more. You play more with the shapes. And if you start playing more with the shapes, you can always, like I said, you can always reverse engineer form back into it. You can always reverse engineer believability back into it. But having this sort of a very graphic approach to just almost treating it like 2D graphic and just seeing how you like the character compositionally really helped me to get to a design that I was satisfied with. And actually what I do then is I would get rid of the rough sketch in this case, because I already had enough to go from. And once you understand form, you don't necessarily have to draw the form anymore. You can just instantly start shading it. And that's exactly what I did. I just started shading the form to where I start pulling out the 3D form of the character and then adding the bow back into it on the back. And this is sort of actually mostly of where I left it. Of course, because it was a Kobold rogue, Kobold being the main thing, I needed to make sure that it had this rusty look. I didn't really focus that much on the scales because I'm lazy and I don't like painting scales anyway. And I wanted to keep it fairly graphic, but I still wanted to, keep it to that rust color and just have a nice sort of color palette that was a bit more down to earth. And so here's where I left it. And I think I like the way it came out for the specific reason that I kept it fairly simple because I was focusing on the silhouette and the internal shapes. And what that meant was that I needed to make sure that all of the graphic shapes that I wanted to include actually were pretty readable. From the potions, the satchel, the shoulder guards, the daggers, obviously, and then anything else that I wanted to add was sort of complementary, but not necessary. Because for me, the main focus was on it being a Kobold rogue. So again, like if you want to create your own D&D character, in this case, you want to create a more anthropomorphized creature-like character, first focus on the simplicity of the character. First focus on, can I bring to life the creature itself through posing, right? In this case, because like kobolds are very small draconic characters. They're very tiny. So we want to make sure that we understand that in the design as well. This is one of the reasons that I over-exaggerated the size of the head a little bit, because if you make a very tiny head, you create the illusion of a very big creature. Think of a giant, tiny head, very large body, creates the illusion of a bigger character, especially if you have nothing else to compare it to. So you have no scale comparison. If it's just a character, you want to make sure that people understand that. The crossbow as well being a bit oversized to what it would normally be for a human also gives it away a little bit. The daggers, which are in fact daggers, are very huge and almost look like swords for this character. And so all of this kind of hints to the character being smaller. I think looking back at it now, I could have probably created the potions a bit bigger because now they feel more human sized to him, where they should be a bit bigger. But again, you live and you learn. So I wanted to just make this graphically pleasing and interesting. Oh, and then maybe on a final thought, when it comes to posing, I talk about posing a lot. What you actually don't want to do is pose your characters. What you want to do is have your characters act. So again, in this case, it's a Kobold rogue. So that means sneakiness and agileness. So that meant that I wanted to make his pose agile. That means that the way his feet are positioned is like he's ready to like go. He's ready to go, right? He's quick. You can almost see him take off, and like there would be dust smokes everywhere, like just because of the speed, right? You want to sort of imply that agility, and as well as the sneakiness is like head down, keep low, is part of the thing that I wanted to include. If you have them pose like in a very pride manner, which you can do, of course, But in this case, I wanted to emphasize Kobold, but also the roguelike nature. So that's what I wanted to combine, and that's what I choose in my posing. And I think that's important when you want to be a character designer, or you just want to make your D&D character come to life, is to infuse as much of the personality and the description that you have for that character into the design itself, because that will make the character come to life much more. Right? So that's it for my D&D Kobold Rogue character. I hope you enjoyed. And as always, happy creating, happy designing, and I'll see you in the next one.